The following feature presentation is part of the Skywalking Network.
Welcome to Star Warsologies, the podcast about science and other academic fields of study seen in Star Wars. My name is Melissa Miller, and I'm a writer for Star Wars Insider magazine and a science communicator.
And my name is James Floyd, and I write for StarWars.com and Star Wars Insider magazine. This episode, Star Warsologies, is going to talk about automated systems and air traffic control as represented in Star Wars by the Millennium Falcon blasting its way out of Mos Eisley and the shuttle Tydirium trying to get clearance to land on Endor. Our guest expert today is Brendan Conboy, who works on air traffic control systems. Welcome, Brendan.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Brendan, tell us a little bit about what you do and how air traffic control relates to Star Wars.
I've been about 20 years in the field working mostly as a Unix system administrator, but the later years as a software developer, improving the code, making updates, enhancements, new features, supporting new kinds of things like radars for air traffic control systems actually around, well, this planet anyway, working on systems here, foreign countries like Norway, Switzerland, Germany, Jamaica, Spain, China, very different people, different systems, but it's all has to be all the same so that air traffic as we know it can happen.
That makes perfect sense. I never really thought about the fact that they all have to communicate with each other, but I've taken many international flights and I'm grateful for things like that.
Yay for international standards.
Right. And strangely, it's funny to watch people in very different countries try to speak English as best they can, because that is the international language of air traffic control. Luckily for us, I guess, bad for the people that have trouble with it.
So are you actually, when I think of air traffic control, I mean, definitely in the movies, Top Gun or what is it, Die Hard 2, up in that tower with the screens everywhere. Is that actually what it's like in real life? And do you spend any time in that tower?
Yes and no. It all depends on the tower, the kind of traffic they're controlling. Like, it's not as exciting as the movies make it out to be.
Nothing ever is.
Well, I know. It is mostly boring, unfortunately. Just a lot of people talking about where the plane is, how fast it's going, when they can land, when they can take off. Necessarily, it's got to be very procedural and more with safety in mind than, unfortunately, fun and excitement, as in a movie, for example.
Yeah, well, boring is good, right, when it comes to this.
Right. I never thought of it. It took me many years to realize that it's classified as a life-critical system. I mean, I think we appreciate that. We may not realize it, but I think we appreciate that when we're walking off the plane into the airport, having safely made it. People joke about the landing being a controlled crash.
It's another happy landing, Anakin.
Yes.
There we go. See, I knew we'd bring it into Star Wars. So how old were you when you first saw Star Wars, and did it lead at all to your career in air traffic control?
One of my earliest memories is watching Empire Strikes Back at a drive-in. I mean, what's a drive-in, right? I think some of my comments, I apologize, we might lose people that are like under 45 during this.
I don't know. I'm going to drive-ins all the time now during COVID because that's the only way I'll see a movie. Yeah, there's 2 or 3 around San Diego. So I'm actually going this weekend.
In my neck of the woods, they're all pretty much gone or overgrown, or there's trees there where the screen used to be. I don't remember if I saw episode 4 first. I am that old that I could have. But seeing that, I don't know if it was the universe, the strange, unlike Earth, I guess, environments that they were in, the story. I mean, I guess it's kind of a space opera, I think it was originally called. Kind of drew me in at a young age. I can't say that it influenced my career. I kind of wish it did now that you're asking that question, but no, just loved the movies, the shows that have spun off on it. I actually played a lot of the role-playing game. Somewhat like what you guys do of writing stories, running that, I get to kind of, use the Star Wars universe, as my tool to create adventures for other people.
Yeah, well, we can overthink with the best of them when it comes to Star Wars.
I mean, it's just such a beautiful universe of, giving you the toolkit basically to write whatever you want. Feels like you can invent anything and it makes sense somehow.
No, perfect. That's a perfect description of Star Wars. I love that. So if you didn't get into your career necessarily because of Star Wars, what aspects of it now, when you go back and watch it as an adult with this career, do you feel like you have this insider information on?
I enjoyed the shuttle Tidarium. I hadn't really thought of that, but that kind of fits perfectly in with the procedural part of the air traffic control. Like I said, it's kind of boring and isn't really movie magic, but that's the sort of thing, are you this flight? Do you have a time slot scheduled to land or take off? What's going on? Is there other traffic coming in? Is someone else having an emergency? Not so much, codes, but maybe in your own way of thinking, codes of, are you the right flight? Are you at the company? Did you pay your bill? That's another one no one thinks about. Air traffic control, at least foreign countries. I don't know about the FAA so much here in the United States, but they make a lot of their money and they keep in business by charging airlines. They have to pay these air traffic controllers to keep them safe in the air.
Small spaceports are like, obviously there's docking fees and stuff, but yeah, that some of that needs to go back to spaceport traffic control.
Right. I mean, your example about blasting out of Mos Eisley, obviously there's got to be some sort of procedure on, landing in their different docking ports there. What is it, 94?
So yeah, in The Mandalorian, we see Razor Crest go to this, docking spot 35, and there's the mechanic there and all those sorts of things. So there is definitely a lot of that sort of control there, which makes sense because you can't just have someone land wherever they want, at least on that planet. Though we do see that on other planets, right? Where there's like, land on the outskirts of town.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, there's no tower at Dagobah there. I mean, it was kind of a buyer beware kind of situation. And
there was also no landing pad there, to be fair.
Yeah. What would you be paying for,
Yeah, well, he may have missed it. I don't know. We didn't see a lot of it, and you can use your imagination. That's the beauty of the Star Wars universe, right?
Yeah. I love the idea that like a mile away, there's like a perfect landing strip or something like that on Dagobah.
It could be like a Las Vegas or something next door, but we'd never know, right? We never got that far. So, right, blasting out of Mos Eisley or shuttle Tidarium requesting landing permission on Endor, there was a landing pad there. I don't know that the Empire charges docking fees to its own personnel, but I wouldn't put it past them.
They did land out in the forest, and it makes you wonder, like, how did the Imperial traffic control lose them? It'd be like, hey, shuttle, you're not going to anywhere on Endor you're supposed to be. Why are you going way out in the woods? It's like your parts and technical crew. Shouldn't you be landing at a place where we could use the parts and technical crew? Like I guess there was no handoff from the executor to Endor ground control.
Yeah, who gets in trouble for that?
Yeah, well, I'm sure they didn't last very long, but we overthink, put too much reality into the movies. We might lose some of the magic of it, but it's true. I've had that thought in the past. But radars aren't perfect even in today's day and age. You have to be a certain level above the earth, or you get lost. And air traffic control is not the radar we think of from war movies and things where the sweeping arm comes across the circular screen and there's like little dots there. And, most of it's actually a radar using radio waves to communicate with equipment on the aircraft itself. And the aircraft will tell the radar, hey, this is where I am. This is who I am. This is what information I want to give you. But the primary search radar is the things that, will bounce the radio waves off targets and come back. But that might be a plane. That might be a flock of birds. It might be a wind farm or something that's human constructed. It might be a building.
So there's the blips that we're thinking of, and then there's a more specific information.
Yeah, positive ID that this thing is an aircraft.
Right. I mean, the military systems get into the, IFF, the, identify friend or foe stuff. When in air traffic control, you don't deal with that because we'll say we're all on the same team rather than good or evil.
Well, also not crash, because you don't want to have that happen on your watch.
It's bad for business.
Let's, believe that it's just to keep me safe.
And that's what it is there for. And you wouldn't believe all the checks and processes to get stuff fielded and in production, if you will, the different regulatory bodies, and obviously Star Wars, you'd wipe all that out with the Empire or the New Republic or Old Republic.
So in terms of interfaces, I was thinking one of the things I do love about Star Wars, especially the newer ones, is when they show those computer interfaces that look just like the original trilogy, targeting TIE fighters and those sorts of things, just that old school look and keeping that consistent throughout Star Wars. And I'm curious, for you, if you're designing interfaces, if that's something that rings true, like even if the technology has advanced, you sort of keep at a lower level just in order to be able to talk to different systems.
It's an interesting point. Yes. In all different ways, kind of HMI in the business, the human machine interface, as people will call it. For a long time, I know the FAA had the controllers union contractually to keep the interface the same, the physical, even though like the monitors got a ton better, you still had to like glue these knobs and switches on the side so that the person interfacing with it, it was the same touch and feel, even though it was completely different. It went from analog to digital, but you still had to have the analog knob on the screen to turn the brightness up and down. You could only change, so many things a year. And the technology, right, had gotten a ton better, but it had to look and feel the same just to, again, keep that safety for the people in the air. When you travel internationally, the flight plans that you enter in your country of origin or whatnot will have to get sent to all the different countries or air traffic systems that you're going to go through.
Yeah. Now that we're talking about this, there's so many examples, right? This comes up in Rogue One with the ship landing on Scarif, in Cloud City, landing permits mentioned. Like this is really, it is sort of a constant thing. And I know you like to leave the magic in there, but I can foresee that if I was someone who's in charge of these sorts of things, I would be like, it's not how it works.
Yeah,
like every
but
movie.
You also think of, Han Solo definitely, will keep changing his transponder codes, and he probably, falsifies his flight plans. He's like, I'm definitely not going to Jabba the Hutt's palace. Definitely not. I'm going to Mos Espa. Oops, I somehow drifted off frame. I'm off your radar. Bye.
Yeah, or it puts out something that he's an entirely different type of ship or something like that.
Right, but I think in order to be that tricky, if you will, you'd have to understand the basic concepts of what's going on, or, how to talk to the different organizations, when to change your transponder code. I think we have a pretty much incredible radar coverage on this planet, but between Tatooine and wherever, Dantooine, who knows what happens between those. And like I say, that the international language here is English, but what would it be in the Galactic Empire? And if you left the Galactic Empire?
Because they talk about outer rim planets, and those are the sorts of ones that I'm thinking of where they just land, anywhere. Less and less regulation on those farther out planets too. But then there's the opposite of that, like Coruscant. I know James, has a background in city planning, and between the two of you, that, Coruscant always seems like this cluster of.
Yeah. What about the air traffic control of all those speeder traffics on Coruscant? And how would you handle all that stuff? And I mean, just watching the movies, like it's way too fast. A lot of times planes will only be able to land like I know every minute sounds pretty quick, but the amount of air traffic, I know there's some websites you can go and look. It almost looks like the speeder traffic on Coruscant if you zoom out far enough to watch the air traffic, even in the United States. But all that stuff just takes time. Native language might not be English. You might have to repeat it. But I kind of liken that speeder traffic on Coruscant to be like our modern vehicles having those like lane avoidance technology or something that would somehow keep you in that. I don't know if you call it a lane. It just looks like chaos to me. But
there's definitely lane on Coruscant is much more like our highways and freeway system that, there are definite lanes going in certain directions. There's areas that you don't go. If you want to go in this direction, you go to this elevation. If you want to go in the other direction, maybe you drop down 40 feet or something. It's just when crazy people like Anakin Skywalker decide to start flipping through lanes and dropping through traffic, that's when, bad things happen.
If you're an impatient Padawan, I mean, what rules apply to you? I don't know. I mean, it is interesting. You mentioned the different levels. That's definitely true in air traffic control as well. Certain levels will be, eastbound or westbound. So the air traffic controllers will give people different elevations to avoid that sort of congestion. Now, again, it's nothing like what they have on Coruscant, but
I'm just trying to imagine if we're thinking about it more like highways, and especially as you mentioned, James and I being in Southern California, our highways are in fact very cluttered and not regulated, right? There's no air traffic control equivalent for what we're doing on the highways. And so putting that into three-dimensional space, what infrastructure would you need and how many people would have to be involved? And would they even bother trying to regulate the car version, not just the spaceships coming in and out of atmosphere? At some point, I feel like they were just like, well, this is the norm now. People know how to do it.
Yeah, it wouldn't be each thing is being tracked by a air traffic control. Essentially, I think that for Coruscant, that individual speeders zipping around is just like cars here. But I think they'd also have smart self-driving features essentially, and hopefully most people use them, and that way it locks in and keeps it at proper speeds, proper safe distances from other traffic. And maybe only when something goes terribly amiss, like a Padawan deciding to fly through traffic, then collision avoidance mechanisms kick in. But you think about the just massive amounts of traffic coming to and from the planet. You think about places like Endor or Scarif that have these huge shields, and you have these choke points like the gap on Scarif, and it's like, who gets to go in and out and timing that.
Right. You'd hope for the people in those small craft that someone was controlling it and someone was in command of the situation, rather than just like some teenagers or something on a joyride, like, ooh, I can get through the gap before they can. And on Coruscant, you'd have to have lanes that were for your larger freighter traffic or cruise liners or whatever. As you're saying that, I'm kind of trying to think, if someone was trying to control those speeder traffic, they'd have to be like an auctioneer on speed or something, trying to talk to each individual.
Well,
would it be by license plate or...
It'd be probably all droids and computers talking to each other, and no sentient interaction, just because that would be so much faster.
Yeah, I look forward to the day that we all get an R2 unit in our cars here in Southern California, because so much of the traffic is just people being in the wrong lane on a merge or a split or something like that. And if, a Tesla is going to put everyone in their correct lanes, I honestly feel like getting to work and back would be much more simple.
And with that, they've done kind of smart car testing in San Diego, something that I saw while I was working at Caltrans. And they would kind of do platooning, where if you could have a bunch of cars all going the same speed and controlled together, they could get much closer to each other. So if one starts to brake, they all brake. Basically, you could fit a lot more cars in, because you don't have to keep 3 car lengths between the vehicles. But of course, that's with centralized control and not human control.
Right. And also maybe galactic empire control, I feel like people in America would be like, how dare you try to control my right to kill people with my car on the freeway. And then the, empire came about and people just kind of got used to it.
You think about something that's highly coordinated, like when the Emperor arrives at the second Death Star, and there's this whole parade of ships flying around the Death Star, all these TIE fighters and TIE interceptors and shuttles. That is probably a control nightmare, but it's also a lot of precision flying that these pilots have been training for. And so it's like, when you have a lot of people all working together, it works. It's just when everybody wants to do their own thing and not everybody wants to communicate, that's when it gets a little tougher.
They'll have holding patterns and things around certain congested airports. It's almost like a spiral downwards, if you can think about it in 3 dimensions, just to keep, everyone in motion, everyone a safe distance, but kind of still progressing towards the same goal.
And we're back to Die Hard 2.
Hey, I didn't want to bring it up. You brought it up.
No, that's the thing is we know that Star Wars isn't unique in terms of, if you have this job or you have this expertise, you're gonna notice it. And my question later was gonna be, does anyone ever buzz the tower? So we're not just talking about Star Wars here.
Well, I know in Revenge of the Sith, when Anakin and Obi-Wan land the front half of the invisible hand, they do more than just buzz the tower. They clip the tower, and you see that the tower just collapse. So hopefully there was mostly just a lot of droids in there. But it's kind of cool that they also have those firefighting ships come in and try and put out a fire on a falling starship chunk as it's trying to land, and that probably takes a lot of coordination of like, yes, this is my flight vector, I'm going to get closer, and you're like, no, collision avoidance says you should not get closer. No, we're going to get closer to put out a fire on this hunk of metal.
There's a lot more equipment at the airport than you'd think of. All the fire trucks, depending on your climate, I guess the snow plows, de-icing areas. I'm not sure they had necessarily a flight plan. That was kind of all ad hoc, I'm sure. And that probably drove those people that are deeply into procedure and safety probably crazy, much less having their tower destroyed. And you also got to hope that there's a redundant system somewhere. A physical another location. There's a lot of redundancy in air traffic control systems. And I remember thinking about switching computer manufacturers, and we said, okay, well, this is what we need. We need all this redundancy in the system. And they're like, no. Here's what you want. You want one big computer system with one power plug and all the redundancies all inside. I didn't have that example at my fingertips to say, what if my tower gets clipped by the falling starship? But
I saw what happened to Facebook when they had all their systems running on the Facebook system, and then they got locked out of their building.
Facebook system, is that near the Dagobah? Oh, sorry. But true. It is kind of a fight in that industry of, making sure that you think of all the situations that can happen and have the redundancy to compensate for it. Now, obviously, you can't compensate for everything. But a lot of, I think, U.S. airports and towers had different physical lines of fiber dug in different channels, in different directions, just so, nothing could happen, in theory, that could blank them out or keep them from communicating or performing their functionality.
So what about hyperspace? Because I have always wondered, are the ships coordinating with other ships who are in hyperspace lanes so they don't cross each other? So I know that's like a very small chance of that happening, but it isn't zero. And I can't think of if we really get any insight into that in the movies.
Right. You just don't want to fly through a planet or something. It's a good point. And I think that kind of goes into the, here on Earth, figured out how to have a consistent system across every country to file those flight plans is what you have to do, even if you're a recreational flyer, just so that your air traffic control can know that you're going to be up there. One, for safety, two, to, help you out if you do have a problem. But yeah, the hyperspace lanes, that would be, wow. I can't even imagine the infinite possibilities there of filing flight plans. And if you do hit something, man, that would be exciting. Not for the people inside, but, if you got a video of it.
I'm sure there's a whole section of HoloNet YouTube of people just watching, hyperspace crashes. The initial disaster that starts off in the High Republic series is a collision in hyperspace. They have hyperspace routes, which are much more controlled. There's a large ship, the Legacy Run, that gets hit by something in hyperspace, and it turns out to be another ship. And it's, pieces of it are flying through hyperspace at other systems. And they call it these emergences, where a chunk of the Legacy Run will appear in your star system and it's dropping out of hyperspace, but it's still really going fast. And, it's up to the Jedi and the Republic to start saving people from these events, and also start, tracking them and figuring out what is causing them. Could you imagine trying to shut down all of the Outer Rim's hyperspace lanes until we sort out what this danger is to hyperspace?
Right. And how could you enforce that? I mean, that would be crazy.
Right. Yeah. If you're a smuggler like Han, you have whatever, beacons or trackers or whatever, falsifying data or not submitting any data. But that removes your safeguards too, right? It means that you're flying without using maybe the updated maps, coming out of hyperspace outside of Alderaan, that's now actually just a big asteroid field, is something that maybe had he been operating legally wouldn't have happened. You would need very updated maps. I mean, not like you're expecting planets to explode,
but navigational hazards.
Right.
Yeah. So it's funny too that maps, we've pretty much discovered this entire planet, but maps are constantly changing. The fixes, mountains move, all these things that, on a geological scale, not very far, obviously, but when it comes to precision control of all this air traffic, all these lives in the air, and these, you've got to redraw those maps and distribute them to everyone that's involved and make sure that everyone, to your point, has the same maps. And you've given me a lot to think about the Star Wars universe. I'm enjoying this.
Well, hopefully we won't take any of your appreciation of it.
No. This just adds to it.
I know one of the extra challenges, I'm sure, for the Empire and the Rebels is that, when you're in a war area, not only do you have to designate the safe areas for your own fighters to be in, you also have to designate this area over here is a no-fly area, because that's where we're going to be shooting the planetary ion cannon at the Star Destroyers. And, we're aiming pretty quick because those things are moving around. So it's like, we need to have you move slightly out of the way, or, what, you guys are our cover. We're going to fire. They're not going to expect that. And we just hope that we don't hit you.
Yeah, you usually don't get punished like that here on Earth for deviating from your flight plan. I don't know that any flight is necessarily completely precise. And obviously you'll hear the announcements like, we're going to try to go to a different altitude, or, try to avoid this thunderstorm and stuff like that. And that'll have to be changed with air traffic control just to let them know, like, hey, we're not where we said we're going to be. But firing ion cannons at them does seem kind of a severe punishment. But
Well, no, I was saying that like they'd be firing at the Empire, not firing at their own ships. It just, they got to tell that the X-Wings like stay out of this one cylinder of space, because that's where we'll be shooting at the Star Destroyers that are attacking us.
Right. And different air traffic control systems will have that configurable to, designate. I don't think they call them no-fly zones. You're right. That does kind of sound militaristic.
I'm curious now about how drones are affecting your work, because it's something that I know that now, even to have a drone fly and take some pictures, outside your house, you're supposed to file with the FAA. Is that right?
Yeah, I think to certain altitudes, and it is, and I've heard of different initiatives where, they're designing systems almost specifically to track drones and as a complement to, air traffic control to, be focused on something so small. I mean, like air traffic control, like you're not talking about really tracking things smaller than whatever, like a 747. I mean, some of the G7s, the smaller private planes will have some of these avionics that will be sophisticated enough, but the Cessnas and smaller, those are just what they call visual flight routes and things, and as opposed to like
pick up your visual scanning.
Yes. And again, what's funny is, that sounds cool and futuristic, but that visual scanning, right, is bouncing the radio wave off it and waiting for it to come back. And like I said, it could be the plane you're looking for, could be a flock of birds, could be a drone, could be a wind farm, could be a skyscraper. You're not really sure until you can corroborate with the flight plan or something that has been filed, and, then you verbally communicate. A lot of the stuff nowadays is the avionics on the plane, and the plane will tell the air traffic control, I'm flight 783 and I'm at this altitude on this heading in this area. Some of the planes will even have GPS and it'll be able to transmit coordinates.
Is it true, like it is in movies? Probably not then. Are jets ready on the standby to like shoot down planes that don't respond to air traffic controllers?
I don't know. It's a good question. If there was, I couldn't tell you. No, I assume near the national capital or any, New York City or larger LA, maybe like that you would have some sort of deterrent for that. But, it all just kind of works as is. I think it's just too expensive for the most part to deviate from that sort of thing. And, it's not like a scrappy rebellion out there going to take down our satellites or our space stations or whatnot.
Or jam our radar.
Oh, just not strawberry. Or is it raspberry? It's been a
feel
long
like
time.
it's raspberry.
Only one person would give you the raspberry.
We had to mention Spaceballs, right? That's a scene, unlike in Star Wars, where they sort of get into the specifics of air traffic control.
Yeah, they have Mr. Radar.
Always have coffee with my radar. I should watch that movie again. It's time.
Computer that shows the bleeps, the sweeps, and the creeps, if you will. Best I can say it.
What is going on with every rebel base? It's how you're going to a rebel base. Is there someone up in a little tower with a radar looking gun pointing it at your ship? What is that?
I'm guessing that is some sort of like, I don't know if it's a verification or, like you said, kind of a radar gun to judge speed and help them land. I mean, the only thing I think that even comes close to that is the first air traffic controllers used to be not in a tower, but standing on the airfield itself, waving flags, like, semaphores and things to communicate to the pilots. But right, it looks like a police officer at a speed trap or something. It is curious. They never explain that. On Yavin IV there, the person up there is, pointing what looks like a gun at the Millennium Falcon. I mean, It does even have a tracer on it. And they don't even detect that. So what is that thing? Is it great?
I just had an idea. It's like, what if he's using that thing to kind of paint incoming ships as a target for some sort of laser guided weaponry to shoot it down? Although it's like, well, can't they just have a computer controlled one as opposed to a guy standing outside? I recently interviewed Lorden Peterson, the model maker of the Millennium Falcon in A New Hope, but he was also the guy up in that tower when they went to film in Guatemala.
Cool. And did he know what he was doing?
He was just trying not to fall off and die.
Fair enough. No,
it looked like a small platform.
It was made out of 2 trash cans on a pole.
Yeah, the only ones I can think of are on those sort of like temporary rebel bases, right? Where they might be abandoning it at any moment if they get caught. And in Rogue One, I think they show someone on that platform when Rogue One takes off, but he doesn't use the gun thing on them. So it really is sort of like scheduled flights only. Yeah, maybe it boosts their signal. It's such an iconic part, of scene setting to me that I like they've continued it, even if we have no idea what it is.
I just thought of something. What if it is sort of a visual confirmation? Like, on the radar, it says, oh, you're coming in and who are you? Oh, I'm a Corellian YT 1300 Millennium Falcon. And this is kind of like their little video camera that says, does that look like a YT 1300?
Right.
Match it. Yes or no. Right. Because it would be like, oh, wait, no, you look like a TIE fighter. Wait a minute.
Right. Because Han Solo's tracker probably doesn't say he looks like a YT 1300.
Yeah.
So
going backwards from AI and image recognition to a human saying, hey, that's not right. You're not the YT 1300.
Yeah, he's got a whole set of playing cards. Each one has a different picture of ships on it. And he's like, I got to find the Corellian deck and match it up. So there we go. We've solved it. We've solved the mystery.
Great. I love it.
I have no idea what that, I mean, right.
Well, no one does, right? Like if the actor playing it didn't know, George Lucas might not even know. He's so good at setting
there's
the
also,
scene.
So somebody, Lauren Peterson told me somebody made a little YouTube video that is a teaser for the Star Wars movie about the guy in the little tower on Yavin base.
Yes. Yeah, because if they can have, I'm reading from a certain point of view right now, and if they can have something about, the red droid that didn't get chosen on the Sandcrawler, they can have something about that guy. I'd read that story.
I've heard of instrument landing systems, but this would be like a human landing system. Like, right, is he pointing the gun where the ship should go?
Oh, like instead of like a lighted runway, it actually guides
a lot of the
in.
planes now will have like an instrument landing system that they can see like where they're supposed to be, slowing down, speeding up.
Oh wow!
And it'll kind of not necessarily box them in, but
it detects the lights and will actually do it, or is it just based on the GPS?
Some airports there are different classifications. If you're a certain class, you can land planes basically blind because you have enough instrument landing systems at your airport. Wow. There's some airports that are like in valleys, for example, and maybe they fog up a lot depending on the season. So you can land and take off basically blind.
If someone's interested in getting into the field, what should they do? What kind of classes should they take? And how would you recommend going about that?
I kind of wandered into this blindly, got a job out of college, and happened to be in this field. The FAA actually has a website that I'll send you can put on the show notes that recommends schools and degrees that you can do to get into air traffic control. Now, working on the air traffic control systems, I think, is a bit different. That's pretty much just plain software engineering and whatnot. But it is an interesting world, and I think a lot of people have made careers out of it. And
what was your major in school?
Electrical engineering, which I haven't used a day in my life. Got a work-study job at school as a Unix system administrator and turned that into what some people call a career, I guess.
I've been in a small plane and listened to the pilot, constantly doing the updates to the different traffic controls as we moved around. Do they make air traffic controllers actually fly just so that they know what it's like on the pilot's end of things?
There are air traffic control training. They call it a simulator on one of the programs I work on. And it'll have positions that will be what they call pilot positions. And usually a senior air traffic controller will use this pilot position to manipulate the aircraft in the scenario to go off course or do something that the controller doesn't want them to do, to test and kind of teach the controllers who are in a different room to, they got to tell them, like,
I don't know, fly casual.
Yeah. I'm not sure that comes up and is not in the brochure.
Well, thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us. Once we got started, I really kept thinking of more and more examples that your background and your field has in terms of applying to Star Wars.
Yeah, I thought I was prepared for this, but it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. That wraps up this episode of Star Warsologies. We want to thank our guest, Brendan Conboy, and we want to thank all of you for listening. We also want to thank listener Rachel C. for connecting us with Brendan as our guest expert. And a few episodes back, we had Dr. Gerald Stark. We want to thank Tyler J. for introducing us to Dr. Stark. If you have an idea for Star Warsologies or know an expert we should interview, let us know at Star Warsologies on Twitter and Instagram, or at Star Warsologies, that's Star Wars OLOGIES @gmail.com. Please also rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite service. No topic is off limits, even the taxation of trade routes and outlying systems.
We are part of the Skywalking Network, where you can also find a variety of other great shows about Star Wars, Disney, and Marvel, including Talking Apes, The Neverland Clubhouse, Totally Tell Me Everything, and the flagship show, Skywalking Through Neverland, as well as the new YouTube show, Today in Star Wars History. You can find them all at skywalkingnetwork.com.
See you